And I always feel that their message to me is, slow down, why are you always rushing through the part? So I think for pagans, they tend to think of doing a ritual as going out to a sacred site, casting a circle, calling the porters. It can be something as simple as just lighting a candle. You really feel that winter is still here, but it's still a sign of hope as you can start to see tiny buds coming through the soil. Working with the energy of the customs that are happening is absolutely fine. I don't think it has to have any ancient pagan historical connection.
Hello and welcome to the Pagan Portal Podcast, produced by Moonbooks Publishing and presented by me, Rachel Patterson. I am very pleased to welcome my fellow Moonbooks author and fellow witch, Lucya Starza. Welcome, Lucya.
Hello.
It's lovely to have you with us. We will dive straight in because I know we've got a lot to talk about. Do you want to start by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'm an eclectic witch. I live in London with my husband and 2 cats. Now, I'm a Gardnerian Wiccan, but I've got a long-standing interest in traditional witchcraft, and I grew up in a family where folk magic practices were really a part of everyday life. And also these days I attended Druid Grove. So yes, I'm very eclectic. I write a blog. It's called A Bad Witches Blog at www.badwitch.co.uk. And I've written quite a few books through Moonbooks, Pagan Portal titles on scrying, candle magic, guided visualizations, poppets, and the Wheel of the Year, as well as a gothic novel which is coming out very soon called Erosion.
Very, very busy. But I love the eclectic thing. That's kind of mirrors my pathway too. I think that's one of the things I love about witchcraft, isn't it? You can take the bits that you want from various pathways and put them together. Eclectic, is that how you describe your spiritual pathway?
Yes, because otherwise I'm sort of saying, oh, well, I'm this or I'm that. So I can really only say eclectic, yes.
We like labels, don't we? I think people like to put
more and more
boxes.
so. I think.
Yeah.
I think you know, I'm a fluffy neon whatever witch.
I like the neon. I think we do. I think we are on the outskirts, but we do also like to feel like we belong to something. It's one of those dual situations, I think, really, isn't it? But I think we draw on our pathways as well. You mentioned Gardnerian. That's where you started.
No, really, no. To be honest, probably from a really young age, I was involved in magical things. I was baptised a Catholic because my dad was Catholic, but he was also very what you call New Age. We used to wander around the house in a caftan. And he did dowsing and palmistry. He used to run the palmistry stall at the school fair. And he was very interested in all forms of divination and obsessed with UFOs. So, like, a lot of my holidays as a child were taken to sacred sites where we'd be dowsing for ley lines or watching for UFOs or something. And he was also very happy to teach. I mean, he bought me books on palmistry. He taught me how to dowse. He even bought me a book on magic when I was very young. So, I mean, it was carefully curated. You know, you had to be a chaste vegetarian in order to do magic.
Of the time, wasn't it, I think?
And on my mum's side, my grandma was a theosophist, and she was an astrologer. And I was very much brought up to feel that everyone's spiritual pathway is their own personal one. It can take you through a whole variety of different traditions or beliefs. And I met up with some pagans when I was in my 20s. So that's when I became a pagan. But I don't really see that as being the start of my spiritual journey.
It was always there by the sounds of it.
Oh, yeah.
Very similar to my dad was a big influence on me too. I'm not sure about the caftans, but definitely incense. We always had joss sticks, we called them then. It's influence, isn't it? I think that helps shape us, doesn't it? But you mentioned your blog, a Bad Witches blog. That's been running for a considerable amount of time now, hasn't it? How do you get the inspiration to put posts up? Because you do post really regularly.
Yeah, I know. In the early days, it was, well, I suppose in the early days it was easier because I hadn't already blogged about so much stuff. But yes, I mean, I suppose it's just looking at things that are happening, books I've read, things I've gone to see, walking about and seeing what's in bloom. I mean, if I'm stuck, it's like, well, I'm going to go for a walk and there's bound to be something in flower that I can take a photograph of. You know, it could be all sorts of things. It's just being aware of what's going on around me and what's happening.
People send you things, don't they? Don't they send you photographs of things?
Yeah, they do. Yeah, sometimes I'll often... Yeah, you tend to get a whole glut of them, mostly in the summer, because everyone goes away and goes to some lovely pagan site. And you say, I will often get a glut of them in the summer. This time of year, you tend not to get so many. So I go, but I mean, I love taking my own photos.
It is. I know it's very successful. It pops up on my feed often. Focus today, your latest book with Moonbooks, is part of the Pagan Portal series, and it's rounding the Wheel of the Year. How did the idea of that come about?
Well, it was actually Trevor Greenfield, the Moonbooks editor's idea. He wanted to publish a book on the Wheel of the Year, and he wanted it to be serialised on the Moonbooks blog.
Right.
And he was putting the idea about, and I said that if I was going to do that, I would rather take a more rounded approach and not just focus on the 8 festivals. And he liked the idea, so that's really how it came about.
Now, the Wheel of the Year is probably a term that lots of people are familiar with, and even the structure of it. I know it's one of the first things I learned when I first started my journey, but I think it also comes with the idea that it's ancient.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually not necessarily that, is it? Do you want to explain a little about the origins of it?
Well, the concept with the 8 festivals, it was inspired by historic customs and also the astronomical calendar. But yes, the 8 set festivals isn't itself an ancient tradition. It was really both Ross Nichols, who founded modern Druidry, and Gerald Gardner, who founded the modern pagan religion Wicca, who kind of share the honours of devising it between them. They're both friends, actually, and they drew on ideas in the 19th century. A lot of folklorists and mythologists were kind of trying to come up with a system of a calendar year. Jacob Grimm, the fairy tale bloke, who was also a bit of a mythologist, was quite into that, and also Sir James Fraser's The Golden Bough influenced it a lot.
I think it has become something very recognised, hasn't it? And I like most things. There's a bit of misinformation that comes along with it. But it works, though, doesn't it? It works as I think it works as a structure, as a base, because I think, like me, you don't necessarily just work with the 8 Sabbats, do you? You break it down into months. And I know the book reflects that. How do you work with the months? How did you start falling off the wheel and into the months?
Well, I think it's really with my blog, because I blog pretty much every day. And so I'm blogging about the energy of that day. I'm blogging about the magic of that day. Back in the early days, I was looking back at what ancient pagan customs happened. And obviously, like the Romans had a festival every day almost.
Between the Romans and the Greek, we'd have a party every day, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we would. And also like what flowers are in bloom. And so, absolutely. I think it came from that.
I think, like me, it's the energy, isn't it? The energy of it is important. The energy of the day, the energy of the season. I think it also makes it personal, because you mentioned Ross Nichols and the originators. It was created in England, wasn't it? And that doesn't necessarily translate to the seasons anywhere else in the world.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm totally... I think that it's really important to... The witch who trained me, and she was a Wiccan, but she said, before you write a ritual, look out of the window and write about what you see. Look at what's on the trees. Look at what's blooming. I mean, she has a garden, so not everybody has a garden. But, just go to the local park even and see what's there.
We all have windows.
We all have windows.
Oh, you hope you have a window.
I hope you all have windows. And another thing that I often find is that pagans will assume that if you live in a city, that you don't see any greenery out of your windows. But I live in London, and most of the London streets have trees in them. We've got a lot of greenery. It's quite a green city. So I think most people, if they look out of their window, even in central London, would be quite likely to see a few trees.
Yeah. And again, it's back to energy, isn't it? You can pick up on the energy wherever you are.
Yeah.
You don't have to be in the middle of a forest.
No, absolutely.
I love working with the monks. You bring folk lore. You mentioned folk magic that you work with as well. I do the same. We have a lot of mirror. A lot of mirror practices. But I think as well, it is, it's the holidays, isn't it? It's the traditions that you include as well in your book that perhaps aren't pagan. But it all adds to it, doesn't it? It all adds to the energy of it and the traditions and the celebrations.
Yeah, a lot of modern pagans will celebrate Earth Day, for example, which is a modern festival. And there's a lot of environmental days, Earth Hour, Earth Day. There's a lot of days for recycling, days to consider the oceans. And a lot of pagans are very influenced by the environmental movement. And so those days are probably more relevant than, say, things that were tied to the agricultural season. I mean, for example, if you're a vegan, you're not necessarily going to want to celebrate the lambing season because you're not going to eat lambs. You're not going to have lamb's milk. But you would be far more interested in honouring a day which is about clearing up pollution.
I think in the UK particularly, we have millions of saints' days as well. It seems like there's almost as many saints' days as there are Greek and Roman holidays, I think.
Yeah.
But do you bring those in as well?
Yes, I come from a Catholic background. I was baptised as a Catholic. And I'm not the kind of pagan who thinks you should ignore everything Christian. I think if it's meaningful to you, then go ahead and use what's meaningful to you. Certainly at Imbolc, there's a lot of syncretization between pagan worship of the goddess Bridget and Catholics honouring Saint Bridget, who and there's a lot of discussion about how the two are connected. Were they the same person, or is it the same kind of? Were they two different people who were on at the same time and are very, very similar? So yes, absolutely. In some senses, yes.
She's probably one of the most well-known that transitioned from goddess to saint, isn't she? She's probably the first one that comes to mind, I think.
I mean, it's still not entirely historically proven that they weren't two separate things.
We weren't there, so we're not sure.
Yeah.
It's an interesting story. And she does tie in with Imbolc, doesn't she? She does tie in with that very much.
Definitely, yeah. Yeah.
So if someone's looking to work with a seasonal journey, perhaps with the Wheel of the Year, but perhaps more seasonally to them, I know your book includes some ideas and prompts, but what would you suggest? How do you suggest they begin their seasonal journey?
I would say go for a walk regularly. See how trees and flowers and everything in nature changes. I think that taking photographs, you could go and take a photograph of the same tree every month and see how it changes. You could, if you're into drawing or crafting, you can do that. You can keep a journal. I mean, I would genuinely say that for me, my blogging is part of my spiritual practice because it forces me to keep in touch with what's happening in nature. And I would say that is, rather than going out and necessarily doing a ritual from a book, just record what you see, and you can celebrate that. You can celebrate that. You can pick up things and take photos and put them on an altar.
I think we all have mobile phones with us these days, don't we? So you have got your camera with you the whole time. So it's quite an easy way to record, isn't it? To keep that record. I am rubbish at journaling. Absolutely. I buy the beautiful journals and I write on the first page, and that's it.
I feel like I get a beautiful journal and I think something special has to go in this. So like my book of shadows is a couple of box files full of like ordinary paper, you know, ordinary like student's paper.
Mine too, big old lever arts. I think you've heard that, doesn't it? We do buy these things and we think that, right, something special has to go in that. But actually, I guess it's what we define as special, isn't it? Recording nature is special, isn't it? Recording your everyday, like say, walks and what you see, even just out of your window. That's all special, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, it is. But I think it should look beautiful. I do have some friends who've created the most amazing, beautiful books of shadows and they're absolutely beautiful. They are works of art. And I would love to do that, but I haven't yet.
But your box of your lever arch box is just as special. It is the record of your journey, isn't it? And I think that is just as special, isn't it? Yeah, mine's never going to be a beautiful leather-bound, handwritten. It's not going to happen. But I think it is, the important thing there is the connection, isn't it? It is recording what you see, and maybe even more so feeling what you see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I do think that slowing down, I mean, for me, it's like there's a little park just down the road from where I live, and going through the park is a shortcut to the shops or the station. And for me, I walk through that park and I have a mental conversation with the trees as I'm going. And, you know, like in the springtime, it's like, hello, you're waking up, you know, good morning. And I always feel that their message to me is, slow down. Why are you always rushing through the park? Slow down.
We do, though, don't we? Life goes at such a fast pace these days that we have to remind ourselves to stop, I think, don't we, to take that time out.
Going to a local park, a local green spot, your own garden, out in the countryside, and, you know, if it's cold, just wrap up, but just spend some time there and be still and quiet. You know, maybe sketch the clouds, or sketch what you see, but just, slow down and take it all in.
But I'm like, you live in London, I live in Portsmouth, so we're both cities. I think the cities have energy too, don't they? Not just, we are lucky, most cities do have that green spots, like you say, but I think even the buildings have an energy, and the people create an energy as well. That's all there to be connected with, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm quite a fan of psychogeography, which is kind of an exploration of the energy of human, of man-made environments, and the interactions the people with those environments. And I mean, basically, one idea is just go for a wander in a city and just pick up the atmosphere of what's around you. And again, you can record that. You can like write a poem, or write notes of what you see, or take photos. And a lot of fiction that's set in cities has come out of that. Ian Sinclair's books, for example, are the famous ones that have come out of that. Things like London Orbital or Blood Heat, which is a brilliant, weird book.
So I think connection is important, whether it's nature to the buildings, to the energies. Do you think rituals are important to connect with the seasons, to connect with whether it is the Sabbats or the months? Do you work with rituals a lot?
Yes, because I do attend an OBOD Druid group, and I do enjoy doing that. But I think it's really up to you. I mean, I think for many people, traditional pagan Wheel of the Year rituals are a little bit meaningless. So if it's meaningless to you, don't do it. There have been times when I've gone for years not doing a ritual. I mean, I was a 24/7 carer for my mum when she was elderly, and she was suffering from dementia and disabled. And I didn't have time to do a ritual. And so for me, I think that's another thing that fed into my practice of doing small things and recognizing that doing small things every day is just as valid as doing a ritual.
I think rituals, it's an interesting word actually, isn't it? Because ritual could be cleaning your teeth every day.
Yes. Yes, I think for pagans, they tend to think of doing a ritual as, going out to a sacred site, casting a circle, calling the quarters, communing with the deities, doing a lot of magic, and, probably dressed up in some wonderful finery. But yes, absolutely, it can be something as simple as just lighting a candle or, having a morning cup of coffee. It is a ritual.
Yeah, I think things like that we overlook quite a lot, don't we? There is something quite special to that first cup of coffee of the day. It is a time, isn't it? It's a pause before you start the day, I think. And that can become a ritual, can't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you combine it with something like reading your coffee grouts or tea leaves.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess we need coffee to get us going. I think it is, isn't it? It's about finding those little things and making them all, like everything can be made magical, can't it? And everything can be worked as a connection, whether it is having your morning cup of coffee or doing the whole shebang. But you mentioned lighting a candle. I mean, that's got to be one of the simplest, most magical things, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I when I teach my candle magic workshops, I point out that in this modern day and age, we don't need candles. And in fact, they're not exactly the safest thing. They do cause fires, but we use them. We don't have we don't, if there's a power cut, we might get out a torch, but if we want to change the atmosphere in a room, if we want to have a romantic dinner or turn our bathroom into a spa or tell a ghost story, then we will light a candle because they have this way of changing the atmosphere in a room. And that is just like hugely magical of its own right.
Yeah, and very simple to do, isn't it? It's got to be one of the simplest things to bring the magic into something. But yes, you mentioned your candle workshops. You have a book on candle magic too, don't you?
Yes,
Drop
I do.
That one in there. So perhaps we can have a bit of a spotlight on one of the Sabbats on the Wheel of the Year as an example. So Imbolc. Can you explain a little bit about what Imbolc is?
Generally on the Wheel of the Year, it's the first stirrings of spring. And I mean, it is, you start to see the very first signs of new shoots. You start to see snowdrops appearing, for example. I mean, snowdrops are probably the quintessential flower of Imbolc, of early February. And they look really fragile, but they're tough enough to peep through snow and survive snow, which, I love doing, as I said, I love doing outdoor rituals. And the Druid group that I meet with, we will meet up on a hill, hilly fields in southeast London. We meet on the top of a hill, and it is the coldest ritual of the year. It really is. You really feel that winter is still here, but it's still a sign of hope. You can start to see tiny buds coming through the soil. And I think it's that little bit of, for me, it's that tiny, it's a sign of hope. It's like, it's still cold, it's still bleak, but there is hope. Spring is just around the corner. And that's what I think it means to me as a modern urban pagan, because I don't work on a sheep farm. I have gone and bottom fed some lambs once down in Sussex, and it was lovely. But that's not what I do.
Yeah. I think that kind of highlights, doesn't it? You have to make the Sabbats work for where you are. Someone living in America somewhere at the beginning of February is probably still under 6 feet of snow.
Yeah, so and then it's Groundhog Day.
Of course, yes. And that's where bringing in your local customs works as well, doesn't it? It's got to tie in with all of that. I think the seasons shift too, don't they? I remember much more snow as a kid. That doesn't seem to happen quite so often these days. And the garden seems to be out of sync, because you've got a little garden as well, haven't you?
I do. It's a bit of a jungle. I left it for wildlife.
Yes.
The foxes can enjoy it.
Yeah, I love this wild crafting. This wild thing. It's brilliant. But it is a good way, isn't it, of telling what's happening with the seasons. But I don't know if yours is the same, but my garden has roses flowering in December still, which is mad.
I always have in my front garden. The clay soil in South London is absolutely brilliant for roses. And my front garden really gets the sun. So I've got photographs dating back 15 or longer years showing roses covered in snow. I mean, of course, they, as soon as the snow melts, the poor little roses die. But yeah, it's not that unusual for me. But yes, I have seen some unusual. I have seen some things flowering very out of season.
I think for me, that's again about making it personal for you, because Mother Nature doesn't read the date on a diary, does she? She doesn't have a calendar. She doesn't go, right, tick, that's Imbolc. So I think it again, we're back to energy and connection and making it work for you wherever you are. So February, of course, also brings, we've got a saint to throw in there, Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Do you, as a pagan, do you work with that type of connection?
Some pagans will say, oh, well, the antecedent of Valentine's Day was Lupercalia in ancient Rome. I don't think there's any evidence they were historically connected, but if people want to, it was a bit of a fertility festival and a celebration of wolves, because obviously wolves are supposed to have founded Rome. And if pagans want to celebrate that, then brilliant, I've got no problem with that at all. Nowadays, Valentine's Day, and I think in England since about the 18th century, it's just really been a secular time to proclaim, love for somebody. Traditionally a day when women could propose to men. Well, obviously nowadays women can propose to men if they want to any time. But traditionally it was when women could propose to men if they wanted to. And I think that again, working with the energy of the customs that are happening is absolutely fine. I don't think it has to have any ancient pagan historical connection in order to work with that. Obviously Valentine's Day is just so hugely commercialized, which is, as most of the festivities are, which is, a bit off-putting. But yes, I think you can absolutely work with the energy that is there. It's a perfectly good time to do spells for love, for self-love, to bring what you desire into your life.
Yeah, the energy's there, isn't it? Because that's what people are focusing on. So as witches, we can pick up on that and utilise it, can't we? You mentioned Lupercalia, actually. If anyone's interested in Lupercalia, we have another podcast from Rachel Roberts who talks all about wolves and Lupercalia, which is fascinating. So go find that. Now, you've mentioned flowers, you've mentioned plants, and it is one of the things I think that you seem very connected to. Are there any particular flowers that you would suggest for February?
Well, leave your snowdrops in the garden. It's traditionally unlucky to bring them indoors because they look like tiny shrouds.
Okay. Now I'm never going to look at a snowdrop in the same way.
I know. When I read that, it was like,
no, don't.
Leave them in the garden where they're lucky. But yes, irises and crocuses.
Right.
A little bit that time of year. Now, interesting, a lot of pagans in England go to Witchfest International, which is in Croydon, Well, the origins of the name Croydon is Valley of the Crocuses.
Yeah, it's a bizarre connection, isn't it? It's not something you would immediately leap to, would you?
No, it's like high-rise blocks these days. Crocuses.
But like most cities and most towns, it's got a history, hasn't it? And I think that's important. That's more energy, isn't it?
Yeah.
To tap into the history of it. I guess February's a bit of a tricky one for flowers because it is a bit early for most things, isn't it? Do you work with the flowers in spell work, or do you prefer to leave them in nature, or how do you make the connection with them?
The last year, I've been doing a lot of crafting using natural products. And I have a honeysuckle mountain in my garden. And it's like, what am I going to do with this honeysuckle? And I've been weaving with it, and I've been making homemade wreaths. It's brilliant. It's so brilliant. I learned to, it's making a honeysuckle basket. It's quite time consuming because you have to boil and strip the bark from your honeysuckle, which takes a long while. And then you have to weave it. But I've made some very sweet little baskets, and I hope to do some more. But also it makes, if you go out, if you want to do a wreath, and you go out to the shop and you buy a wreath base, it's going to, set you back a £5 or something. Whereas honeysuckle, all you do is you go out, you get a lot of strands of honeysuckle and you just wind it around in a loop, wind it around itself, and it's a brilliant base for a wreath. And then you can go and pick some seasonal flowers and put them into it. So that's one thing I've been doing with my honeysuckle. And also, I went for a few years running. I've done seasonal mandalas of just going out and picking flowers and making a picture with the flowers. Of course, it's temporary. It's completely ephemeral, but it's something to meditate on and to contemplate. You can look up what the flowers are and what their uses are, or you can just go use your intuition and make a picture, and you can photograph it.
I love mandalas. They are so straightforward to make, aren't they? And you can bring in so many different things. Pebbles, shells, spices from your kitchen cupboard. They are very, very versatile, aren't they? I'd never thought about using honeysuckle for that. That's a brilliant idea because the stems are so flexible, aren't they?
Oh, it's brilliant. Apparently they found Woodhenge, around the area of, when they were doing the archaeological digs around Woodhenge, they found ancient honeysuckle rope that was still there. Obviously it'd been preserved in good soil for damp soil that preserves things like that. But yes, our ancient ancestors used honeysuckle to make rope out of.
Brilliant idea. It's a genius idea. I know what I'm going to be doing.
Tea's nice as well.
I know what I'm going to be doing next summer. No, don't trim it back. I need it. Excellent idea. So I mentioned Candle Magic. Now your Candle Magic book with Moonbooks is now a bestseller. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You also written about Poppets and Scrying, both fantastic books. Do those form the mainstay of your general practice?
They're the main workshops I teach, but I do other things as well. At the moment, I'm running some workshops on amulets, talismans, and charms, which is something that I've got quite a big collection of charms and amulets. And quite a big interest in natural things that can be used as amulets for protection. It's so traditional. Like, for example, Rowan crosses are so traditional to put a little Rowan cross over the door, or of course in springtime making Bridie's crosses, which you can make from reeds or you can make from grasses and plants and straw and things like that. That's quite an area of interest, partly from the crafting point of view of things you can make, because I do enjoy making things, but also I've got quite a collection of different a lot of people who even say that they don't really believe in charms and amulets will still have their lucky mug. You know, their coffee cup. They have to have the right coffee cup or the day's not going to go well.
So that's folk magic coming back into it again, isn't it? I think folk magic is fascinating, and I think it's still so relevant to our practices today. That's brilliant. I think we need to be doing more of that. But like you say, I think there's probably a lot of people, even people that aren't pagans, that actually work with folk magic on some level, just don't realise it.
Yeah, I mean, poppets actually wasn't traditionally done by witches. It was done by everybody. You know, it was, you know, if someone was horrible to you and you wanted to get your own back on them, you made an effigy of them and you stuck some pins in it. But I mean, in my
be
book
warned,
on
people, be warned.
But I mean, in my book on poppets, I point out that dolls have also been used for healing, for helpful magic, really since ancient times. I mean, one of the very earliest spells recorded from Mesopotamia was a cure for dog bite. And if you were bitten by a dog in ancient Mesopotamia, you went to the riverbank and you made a clay effigy of the dog that bit you. And you put that out in the sun. And as that dried up, so your wound would dry up and heal. So, you know, it's very traditionally been used for all sorts of things, not just for, you know, getting your own back on someone.
Probably we should move on from that one. I think amulets and charms as well are fascinating. Is that have you got a favourite type of magic or area of magic that you work with the most, or is it a general folk magic, for instance?
I think my focuses of interest vary. I mean, I don't just do the same thing every year. I like to ring the changes and try out new things. I do always like to try out new things. And sometimes I'll revisit old things. But yes, I think the form of magic that I would always return to is candle magic.
Yeah, no, I would. Yeah, that's one of my favourite areas too. It can be so simple, but also complicated, can't it? You can do so many things with it. So, and amongst all of your wonderfully informative books, you have a new novel as well. And I am in awe because writing fiction is very complicated and not even something that I'm even going to think about. I wouldn't even know where to start. But you do have a new novel, don't you, that's coming out with Moon Books. Erosion, yes. I believe is the title.
Yes, it's a contemporary Gothic novel set in the 1980s, 1987, around the time of the...
My favourite era.
Yeah. And it's a group of young people who find some bones, and instead of like calling the police, they believe they're ancient bones, decide to do a seance. What could possibly go wrong?
Oh, yeah, there are no problems there. Yes. Set in Kent, I believe.
Yes. I mean, there's a little bit of autobiography there because I went to university at Canterbury, and the main character in the book is someone who has just finished doing a literature degree at University of Canterbury and decides to stay in the area for the summer.
I was going to ask if there's any personal influences to it. But I think probably if you are going to write something like that, having a personal connection, does that help?
Definitely. Absolutely. Yes. I think they always say, write what you know. And I think, yes, sure, you can do a lot of research and write a novel about things you don't know, but it is easier to write about things you know. So yes, I mean, there's a lot of magic, there's a lot of witchcraft in the book because I'm writing what I know. It's Gothic. There's bits of horror there, but it's also quite affirming. I think it's also about friendship and youth.
Oh, youth! I remember that, particularly the 80s. I never left 1985. I don't think. So to finish up, a question that I like to ask is: what was the last book that you read that you enjoyed? Not necessarily for research, but for entertainment.
The last book that I read that I enjoyed was a book called Creeping Venom, and I've now forgotten that I meant to bring it to this talk, but I've left it downstairs on my bookshelf. And now my local railway station has a book swap table, and it's great because you can drop off a book that you finished and you pick up another one. Now this is it's a republished version of a classic mystery that was set in an Irish village and written in the mid-1940s. And it has a witch, and it has herbalists, and it has a murder, and it has some real gothic elements, like they're doing some renovations to an old house, and they find that the area between the ceiling and the floor above is packed with bones. I really enjoyed it. It's absolutely brilliant.
It sounds perfect. It's got all the elements you need. Bit of murder, bit of witchcraft.
Yeah.
Everything you need. So brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to us, Lucy. It has been fascinating. Best of luck with the Rounding the Wheel book. It is brilliant. I think it gives a different perspective on working with the Wheel of the Year, because I think we got so stuck to working with, it's that 8, got to do this, got to do that, got to do it on that date, which you've blown that out of the water, which is brilliant. Because I think it is about working with periods of time as well, isn't it? I think you actually say the Wheel of the Year isn't chunky, it's clunky.
It doesn't bump around on 8 bumpy cogs.
Which is a brilliant way of describing it. It flows, doesn't it? The seasons flow, the Wheel of the Year flows. So that's what the book's all about. So people do go and buy Rounding the Wheel of the Year and Erosion and all of Lucia's other books, because they're all fascinating. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I will finish up by saying thank you to everyone for listening and for watching. Do join us again next time on our next episode of Triple P.
You have been listening to the Pagan Portal Podcast, a Moonbooks Publishing production. For more information, please visit our website.